I'm going to try to sit in on his lecture on Thursday. And today we're going to be talking basically about tax information exchange agreements. And they're a follow-on from double tax treaties or income tax treaties. Income tax treaties were invented in the 19th century. The first one was actually signed in 1899 between Austria-Hungary and Prussia, two countries that don't exist anymore. Virtually all of the several thousands of income tax treaties currently in force have two primary aims. One is the avoidance of double taxation, and the other is the prevention of fiscal evasion. Fiscal evasion is generally dealt with a single tax treaty article, Article 26 in many treaties, and that provides for the exchange of information between the tax authorities of the governments that are parties to the treaty. The typical information exchange article of a bilateral tax treaty may provide for several different types of exchange of information, one of them being automatic, another being information to be given on request, a third one being spontaneous exchange of information, and finally the fourth one is simultaneous exchanges of information by both countries. As we'll see in a couple of minutes, some of the tax information exchange agreements follow that same pattern, but as a practical matter, most of them deal with only one of those four types of information exchange, and that is information on request. It's unusual to find a country that signs a tax information exchange agreement giving any information spontaneously or agreeing to simultaneous exchanges, nor do they provide automatic information such as that which routinely comes under regular tax treaties. I remember many years ago sitting in on a lecture dealing with how information was actually exchanged automatically, and typically what happens there is that when dividends or interest or royalties are paid from one country to another, if there is a reduced rate under the treaty, the country from which the dividend or interest or other typical income is paid sends a form at the end of the year to the other country, and that form will give all kinds of information, typically the name of the taxpayer, perhaps a taxpayer identification number in either or both countries, and the amount of income of that particular type that was paid, and the amount that was withheld. And that's good information if it arrives in a form that's usable. But there was somebody there from the Greek Ministry of Finance, what they do with the information, and he said, nothing. We have rooms full of them, but we don't know how to use them. And the same is true, I think, to some degree, when some of this stuff was coming from Greece to the United States, and it was coming in Greek. It came without the taxpayer's identification number and was hardly usable. Well, a lot of that kind of stuff has been corrected. Shortly after the end of World War II, some tax treaties between major developed countries were extended to their overseas colonies that imposed income taxes similar to those of the mother countries. I guess the best known one for many of us in the South Florida area is the treaty that applied from about 1955 for a period of at least 20 years between the Netherlands as extended to the Netherlands Antilles and the United States. That treaty was very widely used. It reduced the U.S. tax on interest payments going to the Netherlands Antilles from the statutory 30% rate to zero, but was subject to tax in the Netherlands Antilles of 3%, 4 to 3%. On dividends, the combined rate was typically about 17%. Both of those were much better than 30%. The problem as far as the United States was concerned is they began to realize that the treaty with the Netherlands Antilles was not a treaty with the Netherlands Antilles, but was a treaty with the world, because people from other countries would go to the Netherlands Antilles, form a company there, and use that as a means of investing in the United States. And that continued for many years, even after some controls were put in, and especially it continued in the field of real estate investments. There are still some hangover Netherlands Antilles companies that own U.S. real estate. In about 1979 or 1980, Richard Gordon was appointed special counsel for the Internal Revenue Service, and he spent about a year compiling a study that was published that was entitled Tax Havens and Their Use by United States Taxpayers. And we commonly refer to that publication, which is now about a quarter of a century old, as the Gordon Report. And Richard Gordon suggested that many of these old treaties, such as the one between the United States and the Netherlands Antilles, be terminated, and that they be replaced with something new, called the idea being that some of these overseas colonies, some of which had already become completely independent countries, weren't worthy of full tax treaties or the trouble to do a complete tax treaty with them, but that it was necessary to get information from them. And so a combination of various things were suggested. I guess you go to the carrot and stick approach. They were given, the countries signing these tax information exchange agreements in the 1980s, mostly Caribbean jurisdictions that were previously covered by the old UK-US treaty that had been extended to some 20 or 25 overseas UK colonies. Those treaties were all canceled in about 1982 or 83. And then authorized giving a couple of benefits, none of which are considered terribly meaningful, to these countries that were signing tax information exchange agreements. The only benefit that has survived in those old tax information exchange agreements is the one that says that if an American taxpayer goes to one of these countries to attend a business convention, he or she can deduct their travel expenses. Frankly, I don't think that's worth the paper it's printed on, because I think people have been able to deduct their travel expenses, typically without worrying about that provision, no matter where they go, except in some rather extreme cases. They added a couple of other benefits that were even better for a while. One of them dealt with foreign sales corporations, but that became worthless when foreign sales corporations were repealed. And there was another one that dealt with the ability of some of these small places to get some money from dual plants that had been set up partially in Puerto Rico. These were used by a few of the countries, but not many of them. In any case, the U.S. did do a number of these, I'd say about 10 or 15 tax information exchange agreements with various countries. A few of them were given full tax treaties as well as tax information exchange agreements. Those were Barbados, Jamaica, and Trinidad. The Bermuda was given a form of special deals for insurance enterprises, nation exchange. Countries signed both tax treaty exchange agreements, but there were standalone tax information exchange agreements with a number of countries during that period of the 80s. Those would TIAs with DACA, the Dominican Republic, Guyana, Honduras, Marshall Islands, Peru, and St. Lucia. And as I indicated, that although broadly for broad different types of exchange of practice, the only them for information. We got something new on trade matter. But it was open for submission. All different countries. OECD not met and have signed. That treaty goes several. One of the exchange to ratify that treaty, refuse and that treaty include Finland, the Netherlands, and they Azerbaijan, Italy, Germany, one or two ratified that treaty. I think the next step, as we entered the 21st so-called tax national OECD issued a series of reports showing countries, central centers needed that information. And we see smaller internet centers as being full to negotiate both parliamentary field, full tax treaty shopping, that had in the U.S. treaty finally is easier to smaller countries rather than I guess countries request nation for their own. Well, I guess maybe yes, but should they provide any meaningful system? And I is over by some benefits those countries point out and with some of the something in return, much say nation, but countries TI 2000 are follow. In the article that I or the copies I did for all in 2000 in time I did indeed what was TI signed 5. It is about it is that at the time negotiating TIEAs, not other financial. Its study had been made Australia and various countries. They were finding revenue out of the Caribbean and for you place. There has been pressure now by Australia. They have, I think, gone one or two more since then, but at that time they were pushing to get tax information agreements with Anguilla, the British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, Grenada, Guernsey, Jersey. It conducts business from a subsidiary or affiliate in Barbados. And that affiliate does all kinds of actual business, active business, in various countries of the world. Germany signed one with Jersey this year and is reported to be seeking many more from various other places. Ireland signed agreement in Article 2 protocol. It just goes on page after page of the normal stuff that you would find in a tax information exchange agreement. And the signing of that treaty with the protocol and bringing it into force has resulted in the removal of the UAE from Spain's O'Neill stated that he expected negotiations to begin within a year for a full tax treaty to replace the one that was canceled by the U.S. many years earlier. But these negotiations do not appear to have been materialized. There's been no, and certainly no announcement of the signing of a full treaty with the Netherlands Antilles, nor have there been any reports of serious negotiations. Find some other Brazilian tax treaty and some way of using them. In other words, treaty shopping. But the U.S. Treasury, incidentally, seems to tolerate outbound treaty shopping, even though they detest inbound treaty shopping. They don't like the idea that people are getting a benefit.
I have two questions I'm going to summarize from here on the email. Two questions. One, Marshall, if a system doesn't have tax, such as the Bahamas, and thus doesn't have information that the U.S. would have available under its tax system, how is the non-tax jurisdiction going to get that information, and who will pay for it?
Information exchange agreement, and I think the Bahamas U.S. is fairly typical except for one thing. Let me touch on the one thing first that's not typical. It provides, and I think the one with Cayman, the same thing, that it would be effective for criminal matters beginning
the second part of that question was, do you think that the Bahamas, Caymans, or other countries by the country seeking the information, somewhat like the EU Savings Directive? For example, Bahamas, they would have to actually employ somebody. Well, like the I lost Marshall. Yes. I think Marshall hit his off key. had a comment anyway. If I was representing the United States, if I was Treasury, I would want TIAs with the financial centers such as Caymans and Bahamas. Would not want TIAs with countries that use the United States as a tax haven, like Brazil. Under Ronald Reagan, 1986, and if y'all want a footnote, I can certainly provide it to several articles about this, the United States needed to pay for the Reagan deficits that were created as a result of the reducing of the tax rates. And the United States conspiratorially filled the deficits and also the trade deficit by getting that money from Brazil, and by getting the Brazilians to impose through the IMF a tax on deposits, and the United States had no. So the Brazilians could put their money in Miami. In a matter of a few months, something $600 million moved out of Brazil, $1 billion, and so on. And that is well of the United States filling its deficit and trade deficit, both so that was the United States using tax policy in its favor. Now, if the United States signs an information agreement or puts it into force with Brazil, I don't think many Americans have money in Brazil in terms of that the United States doesn't know about. Brazil is just not a safe haven. The United States is a safe haven for storing wealth for many Americans. Consequently, the Brazilians who have kept their money safely nested away in Miami for preservation reasons of that money, they're going to take it out, and that's going to be multiple billions of dollars to leave our system. So if I was representing the United States, that's not a tax information exchange agreement I would sign. So, a full tax treaty. The other comment I would make there to further illustrate it is that 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, seized all of its Argentina seized all of its I see y'all are saying that the sound or something, the picture is lagging. I would just like you learned in orientation at the beginning of semester, I would call a mega meeting and see what was up with my system. Anyway, I posted the mega meeting number earlier. Yeah, it's fine over here, and a landline. There's the mega meeting number posted at megameeting.com. Other countries around the world. So Argentina seized all the private pensions. All the dollar accounts. The government seized that and then translated it into Argentinian currency and basically devalued. So most people lost most of their wealth if you had dollar accounts that the government could get its. The government just expropriated it. It was the government's now. And then people never got compensated, and the government still didn't meet system. Anyway, that's happened again. Now they've seized all the something went wrong with Mega Meeting there. Stop recording.
I turned the whole thing back in again, all over again.
Yes, that's what everybody's doing. They're still coming back in.
All right. Well, I'm sort of done anyway, but I'll stay on if anybody wants to add something. Or you have another class now.
I was adding the comment that which I've already told you.
DIAs.
If I was representing the United States, or Treasury,
whether it's State Department or Treasury,
recognizing that the U.S. is a tax haven to preserve people's wealth from developing countries like India, like
Brazil,
right?
Then I would no way sign a TIA with them because it's going to mean that I tend to come to the U.S. like in Brazil's case, 1986.
Like in Brazil,
there was a huge movement of funds. I mean, it was in the billions in that 1 year because
movement of funds. I mean, it was
the U.S. through the IMF.
In that 1 year because the IMF
Go ahead.
I think there's something even more serious than that, because if you recall, there were some proposed regulations proposed in the last days before Clinton in January of '01. In January of '01, Clinton proposed regulations that would require the United States to collect information on bank deposit interest for the IRS and have it available, in effect, to give to treaty partners all over the world. At that time, the various bankers associations, including the Florida Bankers Association, came up with figures that estimated that the outflow would be something like $3.5 trillion, or that was the amount of that were held in U.S. banks by foreign people. What they did then, actually, this was the Bush administration had taken over, and they have never put those regulations into force. They amended the proposed regulations at one point to restrict to EU countries, and I expect that that thing will be resurrected now. That's one of the changes that I would expect to see. Do it? Maybe we shouldn't.
I mean, if the $3.5 trillion figure is correct,
if the $3.5 trillion
that was then. It's probably double that now. Who knows?
That's a much more serious financial destabilization than anything the mortgage industry could do.
Well, that's it. But what's interesting about it, of course, is that the states get this money from foreigners who pay no tax on it, I've always, been interested to see, one of the questions that should be asked by somebody in Congress is, how much tax do the Chinese pay on their $1 trillion of U.S. government bonds? And how much do other people pay on their interest and dividends and stuff? But interest, zero for practical purposes. And capital gains, also zero. But Americans don't get that break. It's only for foreigners. I've taken the position, as I think I touched on last week, that the U.S. is still the biggest tax haven in the world. Sorry we got cut off there, but I think...
does anyone have questions? I see Paul...
Does anyone have questions?
You got another question?
Paul Lozano. I don't see any questions, Marshall, so